and the screen should be shared.
Yep.
And with that, I think we can go ahead and kick it off. I think, right? Everybody see the screen, right? Cool.
Yep.
Good. All right. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's sessions on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud and the cloud security with Defender for Cloud CSPM. My name is Giulio Astori. I am a program manager for Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and I'm very excited to walk you through how Defender CSPM can help resolve some of the modern challenges in the cloud security. Today, we are going to talk about some major, oh, I don't have the camera on. It is on. Today, we are going to talk about some major trends which are shaping the cloud security landscape and how Defender CSPM is actually addressing those challenges, and then some practical, sort of like a real world example of those solutions in actions. To tie it all together, we are also having a demo to give you a live look how those features are actually working. But before we dive right into, let's start with an important observations. And that observation it is the attack surface is dynamic and is growing. As the technology evolves, cybersecurity has also become increasingly complex. The traditional security approaches that usually focus on solely on defending the internet networks are becoming obsolete. The attackers are constantly developing sophisticated strategies that challenges organizations' defensive capabilities. Now let's jump into and start with the key trends in this cloud security. So let's go ahead and talk about those emerging trends. So trying to stay ahead of the fast-paced cloud security evolution means keeping up with the trends that are shaping how we actually approach the world of the cloud securities. Threats are persistent nowadays and multifaceted. They range from opportunistic hackers to sophisticated criminals network and even nation-state actors. Those bad actors, those adversaries are constantly probing for vulnerabilities. They're looking for motivation ranging from financial gain through strategic exploitations. The risk is not only limited to the external threats. We also have insiders actors, whether through involuntary mistake or deliberate evil, they also pose an equal significant challenge to the organization's security. So let's talk about the four main trends that are shaping the cloud security nowadays. Those four main trends are the multi-cloud adoptions, the API threats, the compliance complexity, and the artificial intelligence threats. Multi-cloud adoptions. More and more organizations nowadays are using multiple cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP. There are typically the three major cloud providers and many companies are using nowadays. They use such mix of providers so that they can get the best of what each of those providers has to offer. In fact, if we really look at it, there is some study and research which has reported that almost 86 to 90% of current modern companies nowadays have a multi-cloud strategy, at least with the two clouds. But here, there is also a challenge. Each cloud provider has its own set of security protocols. And keeping everything consistent across those platforms, it's kind of hard, the stuff. It is like trying to juggle three balls, but each one of those balls have a different size and weight. It's kind of very hard, right? On top of that, managing all the complexity requires a very much specialized set of skills, which can stretch the security team the security teams very thin. The takeaway what is it? Is that multi-cloud environments are, yes, indeed powerful, but they bring a new risk and efficiency. So we need some better tools to handle the complexity behind it. Then we have the rising of the API threats. APIs are everywhere nowadays in the modern apps. They are the backbone how system communicates. But with their growth comes also a growing risk. Recent studies have shown that API security incidents have more than doubled in the past years. APIs can expose a huge attack surface if they are not managed properly. If you have a misconfigurations or an excessively permissive settings in those API, they can expose the application and even the data behind it. The attackers know this very well, and they are targeting the API more than ever since they found an easy way to breach it in the entry point. Unfortunately, keeping the API secure is not an easy job if you don't have the proper solutions. And then you can feel like playing, the game called whack-a-mole with those vulnerabilities. You fix one and then someone else coming up. You fix the other one and then that's something that pops up, right? So the message is here very clear. As API becomes critical to the business, making sure that you have to secure them is a top priority. Then you have the complexity of the compliance, which is increasing. Regulation like PCI, DSS, so on and so forth, and others obviously keeps evolving, and staying compliant is kind of difficult battle. The rules of those standards are not really changing much. They only becoming more stricter. If you are not on top of those, it can lead to big fines and also reputational damage for the organizations. So the organization needs to stay alert on that, and they are actually struggling to monitor all those changes, and then they're struggling to assure that their environments indeed meet those requirements. It is time consuming, resource intensive, and frankly, it is even stressful, I think. All right. And finally, we have the rising of AI, as a threat. AI is evolving at an incredible pace. Organizations are rapidly adopting this AI to enhance operation and decision making. But with the rapid adoptions has also caught the attention of attackers. AI systems are vulnerable to unique threats, such as adversarial attacks, where malicious inputs are very much crafted to trick the AI model or manipulated the actual training data to skew the end results. So hackers are targeting the AI because they often handle sensitive data, the grounding data. Most of the time they can have sensitive information in there, and such will play a critical role in an automated process. So a compromised AI model, a breach AI model, could lead to inaccurate prediction, financial loss, or even compliance violations. So securing them has become essential as the organizations are very quickly embracing such technologies. So now, before we dive into actually what are the solutions, how Defender for Cloud and Defender CSPM will address the security challenge, I want to take an extra moment to explore the unique risk introduced by the actual generative AI applications. So I have the slide over here that try to explain a little bit the context. The generative AI, as I say, is indeed transforming the cloud native application by embedding powerful AI models. They are enabling natural language interactions, right? But they are also creating the significant vulnerabilities. What are those vulnerabilities, which we briefly discussed a couple of seconds ago? So those vulnerabilities are the notion of no separations between instruction and content, also called XPIA, okay? Then we have the notion of a lack of source validations. Generative AI models often trust all the source blindly, and that leads to potential data leakage, privacy violation, and trust issues. Then you have another vulnerabilities for non-deterministic behaviors, and finally for natural language ambiguity. For the natural language ambiguity, you have things like you have the option that natural language can bypass the design constraints, even if there are benign interactions, and that's something that is a vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities generates some new threats. Those threats are the unauthorized prompt injection, the indirect prompt injection, XPIA, and the sensitive data exploitation. Finally, have a threats called the model hijacking and poisoning, where manipulating a model are used to skew the output or gain control over the resources. So understanding this evolving threat landscaping is actually critical for designing the modern security strategies. Now let's see how Defender CSPM and Defender for Cloud actually will address those challenges. And that all starts with continuously monitoring and compliance update. So Defender for Cloud, before we continue, I want to just spend 1 second on what is Defender for Cloud, okay? Defender for Cloud is a comprehensive synapse solutions that helps protect the cloud environments by providing the tools for the threat detection, for the security posture management, and for the compliance assurance. Within the Defender for Cloud, there is one of the main capability, and that is the security posture management. In regard to security posture management, Defender for Cloud offers a free foundational versions, but also a premium version. This premium version is called Defender CSPM. Defender CSPM offers continuous assessment of your cloud resources and will keep an eye on everything, checking that you are aligned with the latest standard like CIS, ISO, PCI DSS, and others, and will flag anything that is out of place. Okay, Defender CSPM will basically allow and empower the organization that will leverage it to take a proactive approach to their cloud security from code to runtime. And that enables the entire security team to, number one, pinpoint and remediate critical risk. Number two, to unify the cloud compliance and the policies with the built-in security best practices and customizable recommendations. Then will enable the team to harden the data stores across all the clouds with the context and sensitive data. And finally, will prevent security risk by fixing them in the code right from the beginning. Three core areas of innovation for Defender CSPM are the following: code to runtime container security posture, which is in public preview; API security posture management, which also is in public preview; and AI security posture management, which is on the other end already available as a GA, generally available. So for code to runtime container security posture, what is it? This feature provides an end-to-end security for containers images, starting from their creations in the CI/CD pipeline, all the way through third-party registry, like Docker Hub or JFrog, all the way into the Kubernetes cluster where they are actually deployed. Let's say that you then deploy this application. Most likely, this application will leverage some API. It's very, 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 very common that you use some microservices as well as API. So at that point, what comes next is the notion of ensure that those APIs are indeed configured as security best practice dictates. And that is the next feature, which is API security posture management. The API security posture management capabilities offer a unified visibility into the API. They are basically deployed within your environment. Okay. Also, you have the notion of have the full visibility into the vulnerabilities that those APIs are exposing, or any misconfigurations which can be exploited for an attack. You have information being provided through a set of recommendations, but also emphasized through attack path analysis, which will allow you to proactively identify potential attacks, potential data exploitation type of attacks, so you can also avoid to lose sensitive data. These solutions has a strong native integration within the Azure API management, and then it is built to mitigate the vulnerability and obviously strengthen the API security across your environment. Now, as AI also has becoming a common type of technology heavily used in today's applications, so as you protect your APIs, the next thing is I want to make sure that I have the proper protections for my AI models. There are facilitating services to the applications. When it comes to AI, we offer, just like for the API, the posture management, but also advanced threat protections. So the posture management is included, just like the API posture management, with the Defender CSPM, whereas the advanced threat protection is a separate plan, which is available in the CWP portion of the product. And the actual workload protection is still in preview, whereas the posture management in this case, it's already available as a GA. The posture management will allow to detect, obviously, the misconfiguration and the vulnerabilities in the AI services, such as Azure OpenAI, Azure Machine Learning, or even Amazon Bedrock. It is built so that it will show everything that is pretty much wrong with those configurations, or if there are any vulnerability, and will allow to ensure that your sensitive data stays secure, and then the AI model are configured and operate securely. Now, one of the biggest value of both the AI API posture management is the notion of discovering those items automatically without actually configure anything other than enable the component for Defender CSPM. This is a big plus. Why? Because very often in our organization, we have some shadow IT sort of thing where, employees or application groups start developing software applications, in this case APIs or AI, and we sometimes are not aware of it. Trying to, finding all those lot of services here and there, it's a very tough type of a process for a company, right? So with our feature sets here, we are discovering all those resource types, all those resources automatically within your environment. All you need to do is enabling the component in the plan. So that sets a foundation for have a full a full inventory, or if you want to call it software bomb kind of thing on those services, which is a great value, because automatically you get the full list, the full inventory, and then normally you can see how those are assessed compared to the best practices. Now, next, I want to go over something which is also kind of new in Defender for Cloud, but is a lot of value. That is the unified assessment engine and the K2L integration. So the unified sort of like approach for developing security recommend, it's the notion of having one single solution to developing security recommendations in Defender for Cloud, mainly for CSPM. This approach ensures consistencies and flexibility across the multi-cloud environments. And why we did this? Originally, we were basically supporting one single cloud, Azure, and therefore our assessment engine leveraged the Azure policies as a foundation to establish those assessment, those security control checks, right? As we expanded to cover AWS and GCP, we needed a new solutions that was shared in terms of consistency across the three environments that we support, and more to come, right? Azure, AWS, GCP, and the other to come. We cannot just go ahead and build a solution for Azure, one for AWS, one for GCP. So we decided to go with K2L, which is a well-known nowadays type of query language, heavily used also for those that are in the SIEM world using things such as Sentinel or even the Azure Monitor, okay? With the K2L, we were able to create a comprehensive solution that, you know, consistently span across all those environments, okay? This type of approach provide two things. One is scalability across the environment. So whether you are working with a single provider, Azure or AWS or GCP, or managing the multi-cloud strategy, the recommendation that you're going to design are going to be aligned with your expanding infrastructures, okay? Also, you have the notions of the proactive risk management. You know, you have a granular visibility into the resource configuration, allow each team to address those vulnerabilities more efficiently, and overall, you're going to reduce the risk, okay? As a result, the unified approach creates a flexible way to develop and enforce the security control that typically are evolving with your organization cloud journey, and that will ensure that your protection is strong and the operation is fully aligned. Now, to move on, I want to simply go ahead and bring a little bit to life what we have spoken with some practical use case example, okay? So for the multi-cloud compliance management, imagine you have a company that using both Azure and AWS for different business units. Each one has its own configuration compliance requirement. So it's a mess, right, to manage. With Defender CSPM, the good news is that you can actually centralize the entire management and the compliance report under one single dashboard within Defender for Cloud that will give you a full view of your compliance postures across those environments. Plus, it ensures that you have a consistent policies that are aligned across the environments, and then includes the standards that the organizations are required to be compliant for. With that, you got as a result, you have a streamlined compliance management, and you have a reduced risk of possible fines or even breaches, basically, right? For API security posture management, now let's imagine a financial services firm, all right? With applications, they're 100% are going to use tons of API for the customer transactions. That's how application was built nowadays. One API endpoint is accidentally left unauthenticated, okay? And that will leave sensitive data and sensitive financial data at higher risk, okay? Knowing which one is unauthenticated or have a slight vulnerability that can be exploited is very critical to know, okay? Well, with Defender CSPM today, with the API posture management options, you can continuously evaluate the API configurations, like discovery APIs that are in places, discover new APIs that are being released, and then assess their configuration, flag the issues like the one in this use case, like the API that was accidentally left unauthenticated, and even identify if there are any sensitive data exposure. By using the Defender CSPM in this case, in this example, the actual financial firm can very quickly fix the problem and obviously will protect their customers' trust. Then you have a case where you want to prioritize risk, okay, especially with attack path analysis. This is another example that it is very important because today it's not only about the knowledge of resources being non-healthy or not complying to security control, but the overall risk that those misconfiguration and vulnerabilities pose to the company. So for this example, let's imagine you have an enterprise that has a misconfigured virtual machine. This machine was built by obviously an insider, right? The company employee, and by mistake, the machine was left with the access, publicly accessed. So basically, the machine had a public IP, and therefore there was publicly exposed. Well, guess what? As soon as you have any virtual machines nowadays, they are exposed to the internet. There are tons of crawlers out there that are trying to identify possible machines in the internet, right, with the vulnerabilities. So in no time, if there are vulnerabilities, there are someone like an attacker that will try to exploit it. And then if it's successfully, we'll try to move laterally to access, obviously, what are the sensitive, the informations, the sensitive databases. With Defender CSPM and its concept of contextualizations of the risk, and then the attack path analysis, now the company can see exactly how an attacker might move through the environment, and therefore they're able to prioritize those fixing those resources that are most critical to the company and that have the most critical vulnerabilities. Okay, so those are just basically few examples of use cases how Defender CSPM can be applied into the modern context. Next, I want to go into a demo. So for the demo, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my browser and move along here. You should be able to see the Defender for Cloud portal. So in order to ensure that everything that we spoke and that I present is indeed in place, you need to enable the plans accordingly. For CSPM, it's very important to enable the premium version, the Defender CSPM, and that is a simple click through the actual Defender CSPM from off to on. I don't have sufficient permission to change anything in this subscription, but as you can see, this is already on, but it needs additional configurations. By enabling the plan by itself, you do not enabling everything unless you have a proper permissions to do so. And therefore, you need to go to the settings. And then you need to ensure that you have all those components enabled. Enable those components is the key of make sure you have a full comprehensive visibility and proactive analysis. You want to ensure that you have the agentless capability enabled so that we can scan, say Defender for Cloud can scan your VMs for vulnerabilities, for software inventories and secrets. You want to ensure that you turn it on your Kubernetes clusters so that we can protect your containers posture and runtime abilities right on the containers pods at the runtime. We want to ensure that not only the vulnerabilities when the containers are run at the runtime, but I also want to make sure that early before it gets to the runtime, when the registry, you also want to scan vulnerabilities. So you want to enable the registry access. You want to make sure that you have data enabled so that you are able to see where the data is located. Talking about data that is present in your environment. You want to make sure that you have a permission management enabled, which will give you ability into each user over permissive user. So it's basically a way to fight those identities that have way too many permissions or identities with some privilege vulnerabilities. You will make sure that you want to enable the API security posture management, which allows you to discover guys all the security configuration. When it comes to artificial intelligence, AI posture management, there isn't really you need to do in these configurators. It is automatically by default, so that one does not need. And once you do that, you really need to wizard to create the connection within the other clouds. When it comes to code security, you want to make sure that you onboard your code repository, either GitHub, Azure DevOps, or GitLab. When it comes to containers registry, now we are also supporting, besides the native container registry within Azure, AWS, and GCP, we also support Docker Hub and JFrog, and that's here where you are going to leverage the connector wizard and onboard those environments. Once you have those environments on board, then you want to go ahead and move to integrations. Integrations are very important because it will allow you a couple of things. Number one, will allow Defender for Cloud to integrate with the ServiceNow, which is very important when it comes to mitigating and remediate those security recommendations. You need to assign a recommendation for a remediation. You need to assign to an owner. You need to create a ticket, either a service request or change request. And this will allow the bidirectional communication with the ServiceNow, where you can actually generate the new ticket, new change request to be worked for the mitigations. When it comes to DevSecOps, we now also support the collaboration with the Andor Labs. So that's where you can actually use Andor Lab connector to go ahead, and that's in preview, to establish that integration with. Now, once if you are thinking to also protect, and you should basically, the entire life cycle of the application, right from the beginning of the code writing all the way to the end in production, right in the middle, there is so-called CI/CD pipeline that will allow you to obviously implement and deploy the code that you develop. If you wanted to be integrated into the CI/CD pipeline, you also use DevOps integration. and then you can follow this wizard to integrate into the CI/CD pipeline. When you do that, once you do that, then the next step is to evaluate if there are any resources within your environment. I'm sorry, once you do that, you pretty much have now integrated all those environments within Defender for Cloud. So you have a visibility of those resources through the inventory. So next is you need to define if some of those resources have a different business value to your organization, meaning like, is resource A more important than resource B, meaning like in terms of business value. And you do that through resource criticality. Basically, by clicking on the resource criticality, it will take you to the link for the Defender portal, which is basically the security@microsoft.com, where you can actually create or configure the existing rule that will dictate which resource has a specific value, and the values are from low, medium, high to critical. So why that is important, because with these configurations, you're able to skew or customize the risk level of a specific resource when compared to a security recommendations. So you can say this resource is critical. Therefore, when we find enough risk factors within the results of our assessment for the specific resource, we bump up the risk level of the resource to critical as well, or vice versa. If it's low to you, we scale down a little bit the criticality on the risk level. So once you do that, now you want to make sure that you want to also have a visibility into where the sensitive data is located. So the next thing is you want to ensure that the type of sensitive data that are you examining is indeed here. We have around 150, I don't know how many exactly. We have around maybe a couple of hundred, 250-ish, sort of like a predefined type of data. And it's made of click on the category and then select the ones that are important to you. We have some custom ones. And talking about custom, you can also create additional custom ones by leveraging Purview integrations. And with the Purview integration, you can also set the sensitivity label threshold, which allows basically the tool to not only scan for a string of text, there are matching specific text conditions, which are usually through here, but also if it's a document with a label, such as, confidential, secrets, those kind of stuff, we also highlighted that's a sensitive type of information. Finally, to have the full picture here, you want to make sure that you're able to successfully mitigate all the recommendations in a proper time frame, right? In order to do that, you want to obviously acknowledge that there is a security recommendation. You want to acknowledge that that needs to be fixed, and therefore you want to assign someone for the fixing, and you want to assign a ticket for it. It can be done manually, but if you don't want to do the manual steps over and over for tens, hundreds, sometimes even thousands, depending on how big is your environment set, then you can go ahead and configure a governance rule. With the governance rule, you basically create a set of rules that are triggered by a condition like, okay, I have a recommendations of a level, severity level, medium or high, or have a recommendation for this specific resource group subscription or this specific security control, this specific recommendation. And then for this specific condition, I want to assign John Doe as an owner, and then I want to basically ensure that John Doe needs to be remediate this, to fix it basically in 3 weeks. I'm going to notify John Doe if he's late, and notify the manager if it's late. But not only that, I'm also want to create maybe the change request within the ServiceNow. So once you have that that ITSM ServiceNow connector also in place, that's why I say you got to do that first. Then to the governance rule, you will have an options which it doesn't provide me because I don't have permissions, but you have an options here under type. Instead of Defender for Cloud, you're going to have that connector ServiceNow that you can use in order to automatically create that the ticket. Okay, so once you have all those in place, then you can now move into the daily operations. How the daily operation starts. Number one, from the inventory. The inventory will provide you the visibility in all the resources / resource types that have been identified, discovered through your environment, being Azure, AWS, or GCP. Perhaps I want to look if there are any AI or any API that were discovered that I am not even aware that were in my environment. So very quickly, I can just go into resource type, and then I can search for API, and I want to select all the APIs. Then I want to select AI. I want to select AI. In this case, I only have Azure AI services. I don't have the Bedrock from AWS. Apply, and then with that filter, I now have only the API and the AI resource that have been automatically discovered. So some of those maybe I'm aware that exist. Some probably are resources that were developed and deployed without my knowledge. This is a very important because you can also create a sort of like a report to kind of like try to find how those resources have been put in place. All right. Now already here you can see the resource, and if the resource has unhealthy states on some of the security control. Obviously, the red is all the recommendation are healthy. The green are those that are healthy. You can click it on it, and you can see which ones are. So instead of clicking on it, basically, I want to move to the next panel that you want to use, and that is the recommendations. So recommendations is your daily page. Here you have full visibility into all those resources that have been inventoried, but they have some kind of vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, so they are not healthy to a specific security control. You have basically the list of each resource for each of the security control, and within each of those records, you have how critical is the risk level for that resource when you assess against the actual security recommendations. What are the risk factors that have been used to calculate the risk level? If there are any attack path there are associated with this resource, and if there are any assignment for mitigating the actual recommendations so that you can fix the the security vulnerabilities, and then you can basically, number one, eliminate this recommendation, but very much likely also break the attack chain or the attack path that we discovered. So the assignment here is obviously non-assigned, but it's an important what do you call value that you want to look on a daily basis and see if there is also an owner associated. Okay. Now from here, obviously you can do multiple things. You can click it on it, and you can see like things like details about the actual resource and the vulnerabilities. You can take some action, like you want to delegate, you want to exempt the rule itself for this vulnerability, or this resource against the vulnerability here. You want to trigger some kind of automation in order to fix or do something. Okay, now let's explore a bit AI and API perhaps. Okay, so oops, let me go here, actually put a filter resource type AI, and I'm going to do this one. and API, and this. Oops. Why doesn't select? Okay, good. So by selecting the AI and API, now I can see those resources. Maybe sometime, maybe they come up twice, like this one, okay, more than once, but for different, obviously, security control. And you can see how they are laid out in terms of security configuration. Most are very low, but you have one API which is critical. Why this API is critical? Well, because it's exposed to an unauthenticated type of vulnerabilities. This is very much a problem with, because it's exposed to the internet and it's also configured without authentication. So this is very important point here. Let's say that you are not aware of this API. Someone developed this API, maybe for an applications or some test. They publish it. Now it is in production, so sort of, or even in kind of like a test environment. It doesn't really matter at that point. It's exposed to the internet. It is unauthenticated. It is a very appetitable entry point for attackers out there that will very quickly identify the entry point by scanning the internet and see that it's unauthenticated. So it's very important then you click it on it, and then through that you check it, and then you can do some work in order to mitigate it. So assign it or even run the workflow in order to fix it very much on the fly. Okay, same story for the AI. Okay, so let's say that this AI recommendation in the Azure AI service resource should be restricted to network access. Is exposed to the internet, the risk level is medium, so it's still not bad, but it's something that you want to ensure that it is being fixed. So for this one, the cool thing that you have in terms of actions is not only the fact that you can actually fix on the fly right here by clicking fix it. You can also fix manually if you want to. Again, you can delegate an owner and set a due date to actually fix it. Most likely will be done in this way, because you don't want to fix something on the fly without having proper change request process in place to approve the action. But you can also exempt if you think that this configuration is okay. But the other cool thing is, let's say that this is something that, well, it's not acceptable. And then now I want to make sure that besides to fix it, just for the current resource, I want to prevent additional resource to actually being configured the same way. So you can go into prevention, click deny, follow the wizard, and that will create basically the proper policies for this environment, where now, from now on, an AI resource of such, when is published and provisioned within the environment, is indeed going to be checked. If it doesn't stand to these configurations, it will be blocked right from the beginning. So it's preventions, okay? So as we actually show the daily, one of the daily operation action tasks that you do, along with watching the recommendation. You also want to go ahead and look in the attack path analysis and see if there are any attack path analysis that are important for you to have attention. Obviously, you can lose the risk level in order to kind of like obviously sort it down the list, and starting with the most critical ones, and go down the other ones. But here, this is basically where you can actually see some of the attack vector that could be happen, okay, can be breached, can be basically carried out. In this case, we have an NGIX ingress and entry point. So it's just a service entry point that will provide a full lateral movement all the way to the end target, which is basically a pod running on this Kubernetes cluster called, and that pod is most likely the application platform which was built on. You can see that obviously the all chain is projected over here. Okay, so you have basically the NGIX ingress containers And then you have the actual images here that is using such ingress entry point. And from here, you have over-permitted identities that allows the controller to access the actual Kubernetes cluster, which is, by the way, is defined as a business value. So how do you know that is defined as a business value? Because it has this gold crown on top. Okay, as a matter of fact, that is an icon that defines all the business critical resources. And then here you can also see the inside that the information is it's identified as a resource with the critical level if it opens up, obviously, but it should show right here. Talking about critical resource and the icon, if you go to inventory, you should also see it through the inventory. Some of those have the same icon, and that means that all those icon are very quickly identify as something that you define valuable to your business. Okay, so through recommendation and attack path analysis, you have that sort of like visibility. Then you can go to Cloud Security Explorer in order to have an options to create a doc subquery, such as let me see if there are internet exposed VMs. I can do very quickly a search and find those VMs that are internet exposed. I can also query directly. I can build my own query, or I can use the actual data that this tool consumes right from the security.microsoft.com, the actual XDR Defender portal, where I have two tables in there, one for the nodes and one for the edges of the graph database, that you can actually query the KQL and see exactly similar information that are exposed through here. Now, one more piece that is cool to see over here is the data and AI security new dashboard. Through here, you can actually see where is the data that you have in terms of sensitivity, and as well as the relationship with the AI security. So, you can see basically where are the AI services and application and model that are being discovered, as well as the data sensitivity. So it's a pretty cool dashboard that you have as a single pane of glance to glance at your information. Now, talk about the recommendation and everything, right? So a question is like, okay, those recommendations are built right from the get-go, right? As a part of the product. What about if I want to add additional recommendation, or if I want to build some totally new standards? Well, I can do that. I can do that by obviously going to regulatory compliance and click the button over here if it opens up. But the button will take you anyway in the environment settings. Okay. Since I don't have a permissions environment settings anyway, I'm going to show right from my own subscription. In the environment settings, once you open up, the environment that you want to protect, you want to create the new standard recommendation. In this case, Azure, but it could be also the AWS account or GCP. You go to the next page where you have the security policies. With the security policies, here you do a couple things. Number one, you can check the policies the standards they are basically enable for your assessment. You can turn on and off those that you don't need it or you need it. Then if you need to create a new ones, guess what? You can do so by creating new standard or new recommendation. Now, the caveat here is for the standard. The standard, it's very easy to create. Basically, it's a matter of creating like the shell for the standard, select the recommendation that are already created, and then just group together in the standard, and then assigned, go ahead, you find by there. But in order to have a new recommendation on the other end, you need to actually build that from scratch. Now, how do you build that? That's when K12 comes in place, okay? So once you select the name, you give a descriptions, something about remediation, you are mandatorily need to select the severity of this recommendation. You can go low, medium, high, and then you want to evaluate, you want to configure, I mean, you want to select the actual type of issue. Is it vulnerability? Is an accessible type of permissions? It's anonymous access? It's a network exposure? It's a best practice. Let's say it's a best practice. You select that one, go next, and here is where you build the KQL query. So the next thing is, okay, how do I know that my KQL query is actually worked? Well, guess what? You can actually open up the query editor where you can build your query, test it, and then once it's so, you can basically continue, copy and paste back into here and continue with the configurations, where the configuration will allow, do you want to assign to an existing standard, to a new standard? Yes or no, review and create that recommendations. So when it comes to KQL, the KQL is very easy to use nowadays. A lot of people knows already the syntax. We provide a library of pre-existing query, but you also provide you the example shell, you know, the template for the query. So basically, how you created this query. Number one, you're going to evaluate the data from the information that has populated database, which is populated by all the resource types that are being discovered into your environments. More resource types discovered, more tables you have over here, okay? It's Azure because this is Azure, but if it were be AWS or GCP, you have the equivalent AWS and GCP and then the respective resource here. So the queries are very simple. You know, the template has a few main areas. Number one is the area where you identify the actual relevant table. So first of all, everything is under the raw identity metadata, and the table is, well, you got to see, first of all, is AWS, it's in Azure, so you have to set that up. And then the identifier for the table. In this case, it's EC2 instance table, which is not over here, but it could be a virtual machines, okay? Then you have to apply the filter. The filter is where it's the where clause, so it's the actual where clause that isolates the resource of the interest based on the environment, the resource type, and the attributes. Then you need to extract the necessary informations. So you need to extract the necessary informations so that you are evaluating. That employs the extended operators, just like here, okay, to derive or transform the data fields that are actually crucial for your assessment. Then you need to set the health criteria. You want to define what constitutes healthy or not healthy for those resources that you're evaluating. And this basically sets the condition that evaluates their status, okay? And finally, you know, you're gonna select if there are any information you want to retain back on the data bag. You want to select the desired columns to project back those information. Once you do that, and you test it and work, then you copy back here and you finish up the wizard, and that will give you a new recommendation. Once you have that recommendation, you might have already a standard, but later on, if you create a new standard, you can also go, you can assemble that standard with those custom recommendations. Is the wizard the only way to do it? No, we also have APIs to do as well. Obviously, you still require the KQL query, so you still require to test the KQL. And unfortunately, to test the KQL, the only place right now, you have to go over here and open up that KQL test, the KQL test portal. Otherwise, you don't have no options. Okay. And with this, I basically, conclude my demo, and then I want to just finally recap by thanking you for attending my webinar today. And then I also want to wish you happy holidays, happy new year, which is almost around the corner, and open up if there are any unanswered questions. Typically the questions are answered through the chat, but if there are any unanswered, I'm happy to take us on.
Great, thanks, Giulio. Yeah, the questions have been answered in the chat. We do have one, maybe you could shed some light on. The question is, do you have specific guidance on deploying Azure policy and CSPM within enterprise scale Azure landing zones?
Can you repeat the questions? I heard the landing zone. something, but what is the beginning? The policies for what? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you have specific guidance on deploying Azure policy and CSPM within enterprise scale Azure landing zones?
Sure. I mean, it all depends obviously on your security policies, on your something that every company approach a little bit differently in terms of what they think the best practices are and what needs to be enforced and implemented in security best practices. Okay, when it comes to Azure, that is very simple because we provide Azure policies as a mean to do so. All right, and as you deploy your landing zone, you can also script such policy deployment. Now, those policies, they are not necessarily the same policies that are used in Defender for Cloud. When it comes to Defender for Cloud, you have audit type policies. So audit meaning like you're only going to check the configurations. Now, you can start with those. If you're not really familiar much with how you want to configure the security environment, you can start with the Defender for Cloud and use the audit policy to assess. Once you actually establish a good understanding of the environment, then what do? You are going to try to figure out a proper governance set of policies to enforce those configurations from the beginning. And that's when you can implement those enforcement into the stack, and then as a new landing zone or provision into the security code, the secure code that you use to deploy those landing zone. Now, this is for Azure. For AWS and GCP, you got to use obviously the proprietary type of technology for such enforcement.
Great, thank you. That seems to be all the questions we have. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Giulio, for being our guest and for sharing the great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/security-community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic we just covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/mdc-community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.